My family blamed me for years. Then the truth about my golden child brother blew their lives apart, and then I still remember the summer of 2015 like it was yesterday. I was 15 years old and caught in the middle of a family dynamic that always made me feel like I didn't quite belong. My name's Sam, and I grew up in Springfield, Ohio. It's one of those small cities where everyone knows everyone, but the real drama always seems to happen behind closed doors. My family was pretty average, at least from the outside. My dad, Greg, was a hard-working guy with a deep love for his collection of vintage memorabilia. My mom, Janet, was the kind of woman who kept everything in order but didn't hesitate to lay down the law when she thought it was needed. Then there were my siblings. Maddie, my older sister, was 19 at the time. She was everything I wasn't: ambitious, responsible, and practically perfect in every way. Caleb, my younger brother, was 10 and the undisputed favorite. He was the kind of kid who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. And then there was me, the middle child, just trying to find my place without causing too much trouble. My dad's collection was his pride and joy. He didn't care much for stamps or coins like some collectors. No, his thing was pocket knives, old baseball cards, and autographed memorabilia from his favorite players. He kept everything neatly displayed on a wooden shelf in their bedroom, like a shrine to his passion. Each item had a story, and he loved telling anyone who'd listen about where he got them or what they were worth. For the most part, I didn't care much about his collection. It wasn't my thing, but I respected how much it meant to him. Sometimes I'd even sit and listen to his stories, mostly because it seemed to make him happy. But that summer, his collection became the center of a storm that would tear our family apart. It started small, almost unnoticeable. One of Dad's pocket knives went missing, a sleek, ivory-handled one he loved to show off. At first, he assumed he'd misplaced it or left it somewhere during a cleaning spree. He grumbled about it for a day or two, but it wasn't a big deal. Then, a week later, one of his baseball cards disappeared. This wasn't just any card. It was part of a set he'd spent years putting together. That was when things started to feel different. Dad started asking questions, subtle at first. He'd casually mention the missing items during dinner, glancing around the table as if he were gauging our reactions. I didn't think much of it. I told him straight up that I hadn't seen the knife or the card, and Maddie and Caleb said the same. But something in the way he looked at me stuck in my head. It wasn't outright suspicion, but it wasn't trust either. The turning point came one Saturday morning. I was in my room, minding my own business, when Dad barged in holding the missing knife. He looked furious, his face red with anger. "Why is this in here?" he demanded, holding the knife up like it was some kind of smoking gun. I froze. I had no idea how it got there. "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't take it." "Don't lie to me, Sam," he snapped. "This is my knife, and it was in your room. What were you planning to do with it?" I didn't have an answer because I genuinely didn't know how it ended up in my drawer. I tried to explain that it wasn't mine and that I'd never touched it, but he wasn't having it. My mom came in a few minutes later, and instead of trying to de-escalate the situation, she jumped right in. "We've been noticing things going missing," she said, her voice cold. "And now we find this? Sam, you need to start being honest with us." It didn't matter what I said after that. To them, the knife in my room was all the proof they needed. I was guilty, and no amount of denial would change their minds. After that day, everything changed. I wasn't just their middle child anymore. I was the family thief. Every time something went missing, it was automatically my fault. My dad would search my room without warning, and my mom's once kind words turned into sharp accusations. Maddie kept her distance, pretending like none of this was happening. Caleb, on the other hand, acted like it was just another day in paradise, completely unbothered by the chaos around him. The worst part was how quickly my parents shared their suspicions with the rest of the family. At the next family gathering, I felt like I was under a microscope. My uncle made a joke about keeping an eye on his wallet around me, and my grandma gave me this look like she couldn't believe I'd turned out so badly. Things weren't any better at school. My mom had confided in one of her friends, who happened to be the mother of a kid I went to school with. By Monday morning, everyone seemed to know. I'd hear whispers in the hallways, kids laughing and saying, "Isn't he the one who stole from his dad?" I kept my head down and tried to ignore it, but it wasn't easy. How do you prove you didn't do something when everyone around you has already decided you're guilty? The more I denied it, the guiltier I looked. At home, the tension was unbearable. My dad started keeping a close inventory of his collection, jotting down notes about what was where and double-checking everything. My mom would ask me probing questions every chance she got, and even Maddie started looking at me differently. I felt like a stranger in my own house. I didn't know it at the time, but that was just the beginning. What started as one missing knife would snowball into years of blame, punishment, and mistrust. And no matter how hard I tried to defend myself, it seemed like the truth didn't matter. To them, I was the thief, and nothing was going to change their minds. After that day, my world felt like it had shifted completely, and not in a good way. At 15, you're already trying to figure out where you fit in, who you are, and what you're supposed to do with your life. Now add being labeled a thief by your own parents to that mix. I felt like I was walking through quicksand, sinking deeper no matter how hard I tried to escape. The accusations didn't stop with the knife. A few weeks later, one of Dad's rare baseball cards went missing, and of course, I was the first person he came to. Then another knife disappeared, and then a signed jersey. Each time something vanished, it was like my parents skipped straight to the trial and verdict without bothering to ask any real questions. They'd search my room, dig through my drawers, and even upend my backpack. "What else are you hiding, Sam?" Mom would ask, her voice cold and sharp. I'd plead with them, trying to make them see reason. "I didn't take anything. Why don't you believe me?" But it didn't matter. The fact that one knife had been found in my room was all the proof they needed to convict me for every disappearance after that. The news spread fast. It started with Mom telling one of her friends about the issues we were having at home. She didn't say it outright, but she made it clear enough that I was the problem. That friend had a daughter who went to my school, and by Monday, I was the talk of Springfield Junior High. "Did you hear about Sam? He stole from his own dad." Can you believe that? The whispers followed me everywhere, down the hallways, in the lunchroom, even during gym class. My classmates started avoiding me, like being a thief was contagious. A few of them were bold enough to make snide comments right to my face. "Careful, Sam. Don't take my phone. I actually need it," one kid said, laughing with his friends. I stopped trying to fight back after a while. What was the point? The more I denied it, the more guilty I looked. Things weren't any better at home. My dad kept an inventory of his collection now, writing down every detail about each item. He'd double-check it constantly, looking for anything out of place. My mom became relentless with her passive-aggressive comments. "Privileges have to be earned," she'd say if I asked for something as simple as a snack. "And I think you've used up all of yours." Even Maddie, who I'd always thought of as the rational one, stayed silent. She kept her distance, hiding away in her room or heading out with her friends. I wanted her to speak up, to say something in my defense, but she never did. Caleb, on the other hand, seemed completely unaffected. He'd play video games in the living room or watch cartoons, acting like none of it had anything to do with him. The worst part wasn't just the punishment or the isolation. It was how it made me feel about myself. I started to question everything. What if they were right? What if I was taking things and didn't even realize it? I know it sounds ridiculous, but when everyone around you is telling you that you're a thief, it messes with your head. I'd lie awake at night, replaying everything in my mind. Could I have taken something in my sleep? Was I blacking out and doing things I couldn't remember? I even started Googling conditions like kleptomania and sleepwalking, desperately searching for an explanation that would make any of this make sense. My parents didn't make it any easier. The punishments kept piling up. At first, it was just grounding me. No TV, no going out with friends. But as more stuff went missing, they started taking away more and more. My phone was confiscated. My computer was locked away. Even my favorite books were off limits because, as Mom put it, "You don't deserve to enjoy anything right now." Dad added a whole new layer to the punishments. He'd assign me chores that were less about keeping the house clean and more about making my life miserable. One Saturday, he made me scrub the garage floor with a handbrush. "This is what happens when you disrespect other people's property," he said as I knelt on the cold concrete, my knees aching. At school, I stopped talking to most of my friends. I didn't want to answer their questions about why I couldn't hang out or why I looked so stressed all the time. I spent most of my time alone, eating lunch in the corner of the cafeteria and avoiding eye contact with anyone. At home, I tried to keep to myself as much as possible. I stayed in my room, avoiding my parents unless I absolutely had to come out. But even that wasn't enough. Mom would find excuses to come in, lecturing me about trust and responsibility. "You can't just hide away forever, Sam," she'd say. "That's not how you fix things." But every time I tried to engage, it felt like walking into a trap. If I said the wrong thing or didn't show the right amount of remorse, they'd pounce on it as proof that I wasn't really sorry. "Do you even understand what you've done to this family?" Dad would say, his voice heavy with disappointment. By the end of that year, I felt like a stranger in my own house. I didn't trust my parents, my siblings, or even myself. It was like I was living in a constant state of anxiety, always waiting for the next accusation, the next punishment, the next reminder that I was the family screw-up. I started to withdraw completely, not just from my family but from the world around me. I stopped drawing, something I'd always loved, because I didn't see the point anymore. My grades slipped, and I couldn't find the energy to care. The person I used to be, the kid who liked to sketch and daydream and joke around with friends, felt like a distant memory. In their place was someone I barely recognized, someone who was just trying to survive one day at a time. And the saddest part? I still held on to a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would realize they were wrong. That they'd see me for who I really was and not the person they decided I must be. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, that hope started to fade. I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, and I didn't know how to escape. By the time I turned 16, I'd given up hoping things would get better. It felt like my life had been reduced to a cycle of accusations, punishments, and isolation. My parents didn't see me as their kid anymore. I was a problem they had to deal with, a liar they had to catch, and a thief they had to punish. My 16th birthday was supposed to be a big deal. Everyone I knew was getting their driver's licenses, having parties, and celebrating that milestone. I didn't even get a happy birthday. My parents made it clear that I hadn't earned the privilege of celebrating. No cake, no presents, no anything. Just another day of them barely looking at me, unless they had something critical to say. The punishments kept escalating. Dad had a knack for coming up with chores that were more about humiliation than teaching responsibility. One day, he handed me a toothbrush and told me to scrub the grout in the kitchen tiles. "This is what happens when you steal from your family," he said, crossing his arms as he stood over me. Mom wasn't much better. She had this way of making every interaction a reminder of how much I'd let them down. If I asked for something as simple as a glass of water, she'd say, "Oh, so now you're asking for permission? How thoughtful." It was constant, and after a while, I stopped asking for anything altogether. Then came the day that pushed everything over the edge. It started like any other miserable day in our house. I was in my room trying to stay out of everyone's way when I heard my dad yelling from his bedroom. "Where the hell is it?" His voice was so loud it made me jump. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I could feel the tension building. A few seconds later, I heard his heavy footsteps coming down the hall. The door to my room flew open, and there he was, holding an empty display case for one of his most prized autographed baseballs. "You've got 5 seconds to tell me where this is," he snapped, his face red with fury. "I don't have it," I stammered, my heart racing. "I swear, I didn't take it." "Don't lie to me," he shouted, his voice booming. "First the knife, now this? What else have you taken? Is there anything in this house I can trust you not to steal?" He started tearing through my room like a tornado, pulling open drawers, tossing my clothes on the floor, and ripping my backpack apart. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he said, his tone dripping with anger. "Hiding it somewhere I won't find it? Well, guess what? You're not getting away with it this time." I stood there, frozen, trying not to cry as he destroyed my room. When he didn't find the baseball, it only made him angrier. That's when Mom walked in, her arms crossed and her expression just as accusing. "Where is it, Sam?" she demanded. "We've given you chance after chance, and this is how you repay us?" I tried to defend myself, but it didn't matter what I said. They'd already made up their minds. To them, I was guilty, and nothing I said or did could change that. When they finally left me alone, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the mess they'd made. For the first time, I started to doubt myself. What if they were right? What if I was taking things without realizing it? I know it sounds crazy, but when everyone around you is telling you that you're the problem, it's hard not to start believing them. I spent hours on my laptop that night, Googling things like unconscious stealing and memory loss. I even read about sleepwalking, wondering if maybe I was doing things in my sleep and couldn't remember. I was desperate for answers, for anything that would explain what was happening to me. That night, my parents called me into the living room and laid out a new set of rules. They said they were trying to help me learn responsibility, but it felt more like a prison sentence. "You're grounded indefinitely," Dad said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "No phone, no computer, no going out. You'll stay in this house until we can trust you again." Mom chimed in, "And from now on, you'll be helping out around the house more. You need to understand what it means to contribute to this family." What they really meant was that they were going to make my life as miserable as possible. My list of chores grew longer by the day. Cleaning the gutters, reorganizing the pantry, scrubbing the garage floor. There was always something new for me to do. At school, things weren't any better. The rumors about me being a thief had taken on a life of their own. Kids would whisper as I walked by, and a few were bold enough to make comments to my face. "Watch out," one kid said to his friend as I passed. "Sam might steal your lunch money." I stopped talking to most of my friends. I didn't want to deal with their questions or their pity. I spent my lunch breaks alone, sitting in the farthest corner of the cafeteria and counting down the minutes until I could go home. Not that home was any better. By the end of that year, I felt like I didn't even know who I was anymore. I wasn't just angry or frustrated. I was exhausted. Exhausted from defending myself, from trying to prove my innocence, from living in a house where I was treated like a criminal. I stopped fighting back. What was the point? No matter what I said, my parents wouldn't believe me. Caleb still got away with everything, and Maddie continued to act like none of this was happening. I wanted to scream, to run away, to do something that would make them see how much they were hurting me. But I didn't. I just kept my head down and tried to survive one day at a time. That was the moment I realized something had to change. I couldn't live like this anymore. Something had to give, and if my parents weren't going to change, then maybe I had to. By the time I turned 22, I'd managed to get away from it all. As soon as I graduated high school, I packed my things and left Springfield for Cincinnati. I found a small apartment, got a decent job at a local tech repair shop, and started building a life that didn't involve walking on eggshells or trying to prove I wasn't a criminal. For 4 years, I kept my distance. I'd text my parents around the holidays, mostly out of obligation, but I avoided phone calls and visits as much as possible. The space gave me room to breathe. Without their constant accusations hanging over my head, I started to feel like myself again. Then, one random Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw my mom's name. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Hi, Sam," she said, her voice unsteady. "How are you doing?" Her tone caught me off guard. It wasn't the usual clipped, matter-of-fact voice I was used to. She sounded nervous, almost like she didn't know how to start. "I'm fine," I said cautiously. "What's up?" There was a long pause before she answered. "Things have been going missing again. Your dad's collection, some cash from our wallets, even my jewelry." I felt my stomach twist. For a split second, I thought she was about to accuse me again, even though I hadn't set foot in that house in years. But then she said something that left me speechless. "Your dad set up cameras in the house," she said, her voice trembling. "We caught Caleb sneaking into the bedroom at night. He's been taking things and hiding them in Maddie's old room." I sat there in stunned silence, the words echoing in my head. Caleb, my younger brother, the golden child who could do no wrong. "Wait," I said, trying to process what I just heard. "You're saying Caleb, he's the one who's been stealing?" "Yes," Mom admitted. "We had no idea. It's been going on for years, Sam. Maybe even back when you were still living here. Years. All those years of being blamed, punished, humiliated. It was Caleb all along." I don't even know what to say. I finally managed. "We feel awful," Mom said, her voice breaking. Your dad and I, we should have believed you. We're so sorry, Sam. We were wrong. Sorry. That's what she said. Like one word could erase everything they'd put me through. Then she dropped another bombshell. We want you to come to my birthday dinner next week. It would mean a lot to us if we could talk about this in person. I didn't answer right away. My mind was racing, caught between anger, disbelief, and a small, stubborn part of me that wanted to believe their apology was real. I'll think about it, I said finally, before hanging up. After the call, I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head. Caleb. It was Caleb the whole time. The one person who had stood by, completely unbothered, while I bore the brunt of everything. And now my parents wanted to apologize and move forward, as if years of pain and mistrust could be swept under the rug with one dinner. A few days later, my dad called. Hearing his voice made me tense up immediately. He wasn't one to apologize or admit he was wrong, so I didn't know what to expect. Sam, he said, his tone uncharacteristically hesitant. I just want to say I'm sorry. I messed up. We both did. We should have trusted you. I didn't know how to respond. For years, he had been the enforcer, the one who came down hardest on me. Hearing him admit he was wrong felt surreal. We want to make it up to you, he continued. We're planning something special, and I think you'll like it. What do you mean? I asked, wary. You'll see, he said. Just come to the dinner, Sam. Please. I agreed, but I still wasn't sure if I'd actually go. Part of me wanted to see if they were serious about making amends. Another part of me, the part that was still furious, wanted to tell them to shove their apology where the sun doesn't shine. When the day of the dinner came, I was still undecided. I thought about texting Mom to say I wasn't coming, but something stopped me. Maybe I wanted to hear them say it to my face. Maybe I just wanted to see Caleb squirm. The dinner was at a fancy restaurant, the kind of place my parents never went unless it was for a big occasion. When I walked in, Mom greeted me with a smile like nothing had ever happened. I'm so glad you came, she said, pulling me into a hug. Dad was already seated, giving me an awkward nod that I guess was supposed to be apologetic. Caleb was there too, sitting at the far end of the table, looking like he wished he could disappear. The first half hour was awkward. My parents tried to make small talk, asking about work and pretending to care about my life now. I could feel the tension in the air, like everyone was walking on eggshells. Then my cousin Emily, who always loved stirring the pot, decided to chime in. Better keep an eye on your wallets, everyone, she said loudly, smirking. You know how things tend to go missing around here. The whole table went silent. My dad tried to laugh it off, but I wasn't having it. Don't worry, Emily, I said, leaning forward. I'm sure your boyfriends say the same thing about you when they're comparing notes. Her face turned bright red, and she looked like she was about to cry. Her dad, Uncle Mike, jumped in immediately. That's enough, he said, glaring at me. You've got no right to talk to her like that, especially after everything you've put this family through. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What I've put this family through. I shot back, my voice rising. Are you serious right now? After everything I went through because you people couldn't figure out who the real thief was, you're still blaming me? Mike doubled down, saying something about family harmony and respect. That's when I'd had enough. I stood up and looked directly at my parents. This is what you created, I said, my voice shaking. You turned me into the family scapegoat, and now you expect me to just sit here and take it? Forget it. I grabbed my jacket and walked out, not bothering to look back. As I reached the parking lot, I heard my dad calling after me. Sam, wait, he said, catching up to me. You don't have to apologize for what happened in there. That wasn't your fault. You're damn right it wasn't, I said, turning to face him. But what are you going to do about it? He didn't have an answer. He just stood there, looking uncomfortable. We're trying to fix things, he said finally. We really are. I didn't respond. I just got in my car and drove home, leaving him standing there in the parking lot. A few days after the disaster at the restaurant, my sister Maddie called me. She hadn't been at the dinner, which wasn't surprising since she'd moved to Chicago years ago and rarely came back to Springfield. Mom told me what happened, she said. For what it's worth, I think you handled it better than I would have. Hearing Maddie side with me felt good, but it also brought up a lot of emotions I've been trying to push down. I told her about Caleb being caught and how our parents were suddenly desperate to make things right. Caleb finally confessed to everything, she said. Not just the recent stuff, but the things from years ago too. Mom had a meltdown when she found out. She's been crying for days. Good, I said bluntly. She should feel awful. Maddie didn't try to argue. She just let me vent. Over the next week, my parents ramped up their efforts to win me over. Mom called me again, and this time she sounded even more desperate. We want to make this right, she said. Your dad and I are selling some of our things to help pay off your student loans, and we're planning to get you a new car. It's the least we can do. I didn't hold back. I don't want your money, and I don't want your car, I told her. You can't buy your way out of this. She started crying, but I didn't care. For years, I'd been treated like the family screw-up. Now, all of a sudden, they wanted to fix everything with a few expensive gifts? It was insulting. Then, as if things weren't chaotic enough, Caleb got arrested. He'd stolen Grandpa's truck, taken it for a joyride, and crashed it into a streetlight a couple of miles from their house. The truck was totaled, and Grandpa was furious. I found out about it through Maddie, who called me as soon as she heard. Grandpa's kicked Caleb out, she said. He told him he's not allowed back until he pays for the damages. Our parents scrambled to cover for Caleb again. They used what was left of his college fund to help pay for the repairs. Maddie later told me that they'd planned to use part of that money to buy me the car they kept talking about. The irony was almost funny. A few days later, Dad called me. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. We've made so many mistakes, he said. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I hope you'll at least let us try to make things right. I'll think about it, I said, but deep down, I already knew my answer. For weeks, my phone kept buzzing with calls and messages from Mom and Dad. They said the same things over and over. We're sorry. We're trying to fix this. We just want to move forward. But none of it felt real to me. Apologies didn't undo years of damage. They didn't erase the humiliation, the self-doubt, or the complete breakdown of trust. Then one night, Maddie called again. She was the only person I still felt like I could talk to. You don't owe them anything, she said. If you're not ready to forgive them, that's okay. Do what's best for you. Her words stuck with me. I'd spent so much time thinking about what my parents wanted, what they needed, that I hadn't stopped to consider what I wanted. What I wanted was peace. A week later, I sat down and wrote a message to my parents. I kept it short and to the point. I appreciate the effort you've made to apologize and make things right. But the truth is, I don't think I can ever fully trust you again. The way you treated me for all those years, assuming the worst, punishing me, isolating me, is something I can't just forget. I need to move on with my life, and that means cutting ties for now. Maybe someday I'll feel differently, but right now, I need space. Please don't contact me anymore. I'll reach out if and when I'm ready. Take care. The day after I sent the message, Maddie called me. She didn't judge me or try to talk me out of it. I get it, she said simply. You have to do what's right for you. Caleb never reached out. Not that I expected him to. From what Maddie told me, he was still acting like nothing was his fault. It didn't surprise me. It's just who he is. It's been a few months since I sent that message, and honestly, I feel good about my decision. Cutting ties wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. I've been focusing on my own life, my job, my friends, and the things that make me happy. It's not perfect, but it's mine, and that's what matters. My parents still have a lot of work to do if they ever want a real shot at rebuilding our relationship. Saying sorry isn't enough. They need to prove they've changed, and honestly, I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm done being the scapegoat, the target, or the project they think they need to fix. Sometimes walking away is the only way to heal, and for me, it was the only choice I had left. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this much. I'm finally free to live my life on my terms. And that's a start. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? Imagine living that nightmare for years, only to discover the truth hidden in plain sight. My story is one of betrayal, redemption, and finally breaking free from the chains of family drama. If you've ever struggled to reclaim your voice or find peace, this story is for you. Dive in and see how I turned pain into power, because sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make.